We have Erin joining us.
Yes. Hi, Erin. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the.
I feel better when all the speakers are here.
Okay, so I think we're ready to go.
Good. Okay, should I put my screen on?
Yep.
Okay. I think that's. Whoop. Is that on for everyone?
Yep.
Okay, good. Well, welcome along, everyone. I think maybe we're a little bit too big to go round and introduce you, but we will do some workshopped activity later on, so you get to meet at least some of the people in the group. So welcome to our session within the People Value Stream. It's been a little while since we had a session. We've probably been busy working post-COVID or writing or whatever various activities. So it's good to be back with you. This is the agenda that we have for the session. We put it in UK time and Central time. So in UK time, we're just after 2 o'clock. So we're just going to do a little bit of introduction, Cheryl and myself. And then you can see we've really divided the day into 2 sessions. So the first one I'm going to run, which is going to be looking around behaviors and particularly about KBIs, which I know some of you have an interest in. And we'll have a workshop inside that sort of session. And then the second half of the day, do you want to describe that, Cheryl?
The second half of the day, we're focusing on the use of empathy for improvement with different approaches. May Lee from McKee Foods is going to be showing one approach, and then we have Erin Cole from Discover showing the use of technology. And I'll be closing us up with the use of empathy maps in a way, hopefully as a tool. Those of you joining us today can take away and use if you haven't been exposed to it. And then we'll close up. So we have a pretty nice variety. And I am really looking forward to the KBI discussion this morning, Peter.
Good. Well, I'm looking forward to everything.
Yeah,
okay.
And I've got the front door is going to ring shortly. I can hear it. So if we can maybe introduce me first.
Okay, Cheryl first.
Many of you know me, and actually, Melissa, you're going to recognize this picture. So Peter and I we have been working together, our joint effort we call the People Value Stream Global Network, which is just a network of people focused on looking at new ways of how we appreciate how we support people in the workplace as a way to get the best results, and basically what's good for people will be good for your organization. So as part of that, it's where do our passions link to our work? And I'm really passionate about art. So I'm having dinner with Oscar at a restaurant. And so this is just one of the pictures I used to, I always said if actually I didn't need to work, I would just be a full-time artist. That's all I would do. So I actually have most of the artwork out of my office because we're painting my office later today. So welcome to everyone. I work out of the Chicagoland area, and my focus has always been the people part of continuous improvement, and look forward to hearing more today.
Thank you very much, Cheryl. I'll do the introduction for me. So I'm Peter Hines, and I'm working based in Wales in the UK. And I suppose my background was more a sort of pure lean background than Cheryl's. Came probably more from the HR side into lean, if you like, that way. I used to run the Lean Enterprise Research Centre at Cardiff University, which I set up with Dan Jones. And basically that became the largest academic research centre in lean globally. And then over time also did consulting work, set up a company, etc., which I now sold. So really, a lot of stuff I'm doing now is sort of research, action research, and I'm interested not in more and more about lean, because I think we probably know enough about lean and the tools. What I'm interested in is how we can bring in knowledge and integrate with other areas around. So one area is integrating with the people side, and hence the people value stream. My other interests, I'm interested in the session later, is the integration on the other side of lean with technology and industry 4.0, so the AI would fit very nicely into that area. So if you've not been on one of our sessions before, the idea of the people value stream was basically that if we think about, instead of the product flow and the information and product flow map, the value stream map we're all familiar with, if you apply this to people and you think of the customer being the line manager in the business, and HR sort of being like production control, and the supplier being, if you like, the person, and then the person's journey through the organization, what we saw was actually this is very similar to a current state map in terms of being disjointed, push going on, fairly unhappy people. I was reading some data that people actually become unhappier from the day they join the business, and actually it's the first 90 days that's the main period where they become less happy than they started. So actually that fits very nicely with the second half of what we're going to talk about today, and hence it's a really disjointed flow, and obviously in HR terms this is more like talent management, I suppose. So we sort of thought of it as a value stream. It's a very simple version of you've got the customers in terms of the team and ultimately the business, the flow through HR, and we might envisage HR more as culture and people rather than a traditional HR function. And then we need to understand purpose and meaning for the individuals and help them flow through their journey. So flow from the psychological point of view, but also flow from the lean point of view. So in other words, they reach their destination faster, more efficiently, without disruptions and so forth, and have a more happy and successful career. So that's basically the sort of idea of the people value stream. As we said, what we're going to do here is we're going to take sort of two areas. I'm going to focus on the key behavioral indicators or key behavioral indices for the first part. And so in my session, I'm going to more tell you stuff, and we're going to have a little bit of interaction, a little bit of a workshop during the session. And in Cheryl's session, it's going to be more lots of short sessions and different speakers and so forth. So first question, I'm going to stop sharing so I can actually see people for a minute. So if you can put your camera on, it'd be great. Does anyone have any experience of working with KBIs, key behavioral indices, or is it a new term for people? Melissa's sort of doing a vague maybe sort of movement with her head. Do you want to say anything, Melissa?
Just it's a new term. I'm trying to understand it better and feel that it's an important thing for us to use.
Okay, very good. So Helen, you've I'm sure had experience of this. Do you want to share your thoughts on it?
Yeah, my experience has most recently been trying to get healthcare leaders to understand the importance of behaviors and to identify what ideal looks like and what ideal doesn't look like.
Right, right. Okay, very good. Anyone else like to share anything they're doing in this space? We've got a very quiet group here, very quiet. Wow.
I think they're here to learn it.
Okay. Why don't we go back and I'll move on.
You explain it.
So as Cheryl says, you may not be any of the wiser once I've shared it, but Cheryl will tell you what I meant to say anyway. So let's have a go. Let's move on to KBI. So the whole concept of KBIs was really coined by the Shingo Institute. I think they were the first to talk about it. And on the left-hand side, we have the Shingo model. And particularly this area comes in the middle of the model, which is culture and behaviors. I'm sorry about the spelling mistake on behaviors. Those of you in North America will probably think it's okay, but anyway, moving on. So we really can see that if we're trying to respect people or respect every individual and lead with humility, we really need to adopt the right behaviors, but not just for the senior people, but actually really behaviors right across the whole organization. And in the Shingo approach, this is something that's been being worked on for many years now. One of the observations I had was that I'm not sure always organizations find this topic of KBIs very easy to grasp. And I've seen many organizations talk about KBIs, and really they're talking about lead measures. They're not really talking about behaviors in the sense that I would say. So we're going to spend a bit of time trying to differentiate between what a lead measure is and actually what a behavior and how we might measure that. So I suppose some of the background thinking and what helped me understand the Shingo approach quite clearly was some work by John Alder, who was the head of Lean Enterprise for what was then Wrexham. It's now been taken over by the Ball Corporation, soft drinks and so forth, cans. And as he said here, our traditional way of thinking of Lean is we start by losing the tools, and then we maybe try and look at a whole system like order fulfillment or strategy deployment, something like that. And eventually, most of us realize the key to success is actually the culture that we're actually engendering. And if I speak to senior CEOs or retiring folk and say, you know, if they've done a good job with Lean, what would they have done better? It's usually we'd have gone on to the culture stuff sooner on the journey. So what John did is he sort of put this picture up and said, well, actually, we should be starting with culture, particularly with the senior leaders, and then maybe the managers should be looking after the systems, and the tools, the associates sort of get on with the tools. So this was a way of sort of simplifying and explaining a little bit of what the Shingo approach was, which I found helpful. So just think about this. It's reversing the flow that we've usually done. And we'll come full journey back to that at the end of this short session. So I'm going to try and cover 5 things. So the first is what is a behavior and why is it important? The second, this issue of KPIs and KBIs, what are they? How do they all fit together? And then I'm going to share a short case with a bakery company about developing KBIs and getting them down onto the lower levels of the organization. And then I'm going to share some work. These are all brief cases rather than big cases that I've been doing, well, just before COVID, really, with Nestle. This is in an R&D facility where we started to look at different types and levels of KBIs. And then the last one, which is just one slide, is where we've actually taken KBIs fully into the daily management system and actually start meetings with KBIs. So we actually fully reverse things around and start with the behaviors that we're actually working on. So this is one of my favorite academic researchers. She's very smart. She nearly did her PhD with me, but decided not to. So that shows she's pretty smart. So Desiree van Daan, based in the University of Twente in the Netherlands. And she's a big researcher on this sort of behavior, talks about leaders and also the importance of followership, because you can't just lead, you need people to follow as well. So what she talks about in terms of behavior being specific, observable, verbal and non-verbal actions of managers in interaction with their followers in an organizational setting. So this isn't just what we say, it's what we do, how we do it. It's our facial expressions, it's our body language, it's all of those behaviors that's going on. And just highlighting the bit at the bottom, such an effective behavioral repertoire is likely to result in psychological safety that in turn encourages employees to freely communicate, to express their reflective thoughts and ideas for improving their work, and to be frank and even about their mistakes. So the point being, is almost, unless we do set this sort of foundation with the behaviors and so forth, we're unlikely to get the sort of improvements or the sustainability of improvements that we might think if we think of the classic sort of technical improvement that lean has in industrial engineering terms. So this is a little exercise. So I'm going to pick someone in the audience. So I'm going to have to stop sharing and pick someone. How about maybe I'll have a volunteer. Who would like to be my volunteer for today? Didier, look, you're smiling too much. It's going to have to be you. Well volunteered, Didier. That's
Want to make me cry, huh?
That's very generous of you to. Okay, so we're going to think about this. So which of the following is a behavior? So we're looking at a sort of team environment, doesn't matter which industry or level. So the team leader has a good idea of who is doing a good job in the team. Is that a behavior, Didier?
No, it's not, because I cannot observe it.
Absolutely, absolutely. So clearly it's a good thing because it's a foundation for being able to do something, but unless you do something, it isn't a behavior and it's not so valuable. So the second one, the team leader knows how and when to recognize people within the team. Is that a behavior?
It's not.
No.
Knowledge is not observable.
Very good, very good. So in other words, again, number one is good, number two is even better, but actually the clue is probably the third one's going to be a behavior, isn't it? So the team leader recognizes the appropriate people in the team. We can agree it is the behavior. Yes.
It is it is a behavior. I don't know what appropriate will be. That will,
right. Okay, well, we have to assume there's some way of understanding who needs to be recognized and so forth. So as Helen said earlier in her brief introduction, the important thing with behavior is not just getting some behaviors, but actually understanding ideal behaviors. So the team leader recognizes the appropriate people in the team is good, but what about all the other team leaders? You know, what about how often they do it? Is it once a year at the annual award ceremony, which is maybe fine, but you know, maybe it needs to be on a much more regular basis. So this is clearly not an ideal behavior. It's a behavior, but it's not an ideal behavior. So as Didier was saying, behaviors need to be observed, described, and recorded. So I like to think of it, you know, you can video it. If you can't video it, it's not a behavior. So someone could be speaking, or they could be, you know, sitting with their hands on their hips, or they could be, you know, whatever. And if we can video it, it's probably a behavior. So this is probably going a little bit far, but just to sort of overegg the point maybe of if we want to make it ideal, we need to ask a few questions. These are the sort of questions that we might ask. So the first question we ask is this behavior only relevant for one team leader or many? Clearly the answer is many. How often does this recognition take place? Is it once a year? Is it once a day? Is it once an hour? We don't know. How timely is it? So if I recognize someone 6 months after they've done something, it won't have the same impact as something they did in the last 10 minutes. How much effort and detail has gone into the recognition? And actually, we could have too much effort and detail, and then it doesn't come across as genuine. So sometimes a little handwritten note can come across more genuine than some big award or money or something like that. What form or forms does the recognition take? So the issue here is different people in different cultures and maybe different levels of the organization might want to receive recognition in a different way. Is it well received by the individual? And importantly, the bottom line is, does it lead to a change in behavior or more of the existing behavior and a change in behavior for others? That's what we're really trying to achieve. So if you take all of these are example questions that you might be asking. So you might come up with a statement that's more like an ideal behavior like this. So all managers regularly recognize the appropriate people in their team in a timely way through a range of informal and formal impactful methods. So this might be an ideal behavior, or in the language that I'm going to call it a behavioral norm. So behavioral norm is something that we might agree in the organization is a behavior that we want to happen right across the organization. However, the important point here is what this behavior looks like and means to the CEO might not be the same to a frontline team leader, because regularly, if a CEO only visits a site, 3 times a year, regular might mean something different from a frontline team leader that might be regularly talking to their people every hour. So in other words, we need to deploy this and make it meaningful at a lower level. So what you'll see in this session is I've tried to mirror best practice in Hoshinkanri or strategy deployment, where you develop the outline of what are we trying to achieve at the senior level, and then when you deploy it to the local level gets a great deal of autonomy and what does it mean to them and how are they going to use it, how are they going to do it. So that's what you'll see here. So part of what we're talking about is forming behavioral norms. In other words, maybe 6 or 8 things that we might want to have in the organization. And then the second stage is deploying them down so that they touch every single individual in the organization. So before we get more into KBIs, I'm going to just spend a few minutes on KPIs and KBIs and what are they, how do they fit together. So if you think about this little color picture on the left-hand side, so if you think about the axis along here is stage of maturity. So this end is very little enterprise excellence. This is sort of world-class over here. And the type of measures, say you got 10 measures, how many are different types? So what we find with low-level organizations is nearly all of their certainly senior level KPIs tend to be what we could say are lag KPIs or output KPIs. So you could think about profit, on-time delivery, revenue growth, lost time instance, those are the sort of things, etc. So for many organizations, that's the only thing that they measure. Now, the problem is you're measuring something after the event that's happened, and hence the measure isn't really going to do much to drive the change. So it's a bit like I've had an accident, oh dear, let's measure how many times that's happened. It doesn't stop me having accidents. So lead measures, which some organizations have done a great job, OC Tanner being one, if you've come across them. For every lag measure, they have a lead measure, and the person involved has a big say on what that lead measure might be. So this might be, say, the maturity of improvement activity, the amount of time we spend on improvement, that type of thing. And by focusing on that, we might improve profit, on-time delivery, etc. So obviously, there's quite a job to work out what lead measure do we need to, what lever, driver do we need to pull, in other words, to affect the output measure, the lag measure. And in my mind, KBIs are just a stage further. So in other words, if we were trying to improve the time spent on improvement, or the number of near misses that we capture, or the maturity of our activity, what are the behaviors that we need that will result us improving those? So if you like, it's a further sort of proactive step. So the sort of things that we might have might be, well, meeting attendance, for example. So, if we're going to focus on improvement, if people don't turn up to the meeting on time to focus on the improvement, if we're having a Kaizen event, then the Kaizen event isn't likely to be successful. And equally well, a behavior might be, certainly at Toyota, big focus on this behavior is the adherence to standards. So a huge amount of the work in Toyota for a team leader, a group leader, is actually abnormality management, and then working with team members on how do we get a behavior that they stick to standards. And obviously, discipline to follow safety regimes might be a behavior as well. So those are the sort of area, that's the sort of split between what these things are. So just to give you a little bit more detail, this is an organization that I've worked with over the last sort of 5 or 6, maybe more than that actually, 5, maybe 8 years. And this is an example. It's actually it's actually from an office environment. It's Welsh Water is the utility company for Wales, so they're supplying drinking water and sewage services, etc. So what they've got, and you can neatly see this. This is just a snapshot from one of their visual management boards, and this is an area around safety where they have various measures. So what you can see is at the bottom of the board are lag KPIs. So how many accidents did we have, basically, of different types? So in other words, this is a failure. We obviously don't want this to happen, but we actually record it. But by recording it, it's more like recording profit. It's not driving anything. It's just a report, an end. It's sort of thing you come out of the finance office, for example. And hence, in order to try and improve the number of accidents, they actually focus on near misses. So if I've got a near miss, someone nearly fell over or fell down the stairs or whatever it might mean, then we could say, well, why did they do that? And we could do something about it so someone else doesn't happen. So obviously that is making the number of lost time incidents reduce. So that's a lead KPI, which is very good. But they go further than this, and they have what they call positive interventions. So positive interventions is basically a behavior. So this is around behavioral based safety, which obviously some firms have. So as you can see on the just a little card next to this, so positive intervention is when you have identified and done something to remove the risk of a near miss or accident. So for instance, if I'm sitting in a meeting in Welsh Water and I have a bad habit of rocking back on my chair, maybe some of you do as well, someone will say to me, you're rocking back on the chair, that's dangerous. You haven't had a near miss, but actually, could you not do that because you might endanger yourself or somebody else? So in other words, the behavior is they've done something to address that. And as a result of that, that might change my behavior to maybe stop rocking back on the chair. So that is KBI. So the KBI is not the near miss, it's actually the positive intervention. So over a period of time, you would expect maybe near misses to go up and then come down, and then positive interventions go up and then come down as you get people behaving in a better way. Okay, good. Yep, Helen liked that one. Anyway, so that's really what we mean by a KBI. So I'm going to stop now for a couple of minutes, or maybe we'll have I'll just give you 5 minutes on this. So Emma's going to put you into groups. So in your group, we'll have 3 or 4 people per group, something like that. I want you to pick one output lag KPI, like profit, growth in turnover, on-time delivery, that sort of thing. And then think about what would be a good example of a lead KPI that would drive that, and then what would be a good example of a key behavioral indice that would drive that lead behavior. So just have a go at one. If you get time to do 2, that's okay, and then maybe I'll have 1 or 2 groups just present back something they've done. Are we okay? That's what we're trying to do. So we're sort of trying to do a bit like this example here. Accidents was the output KPI, the lag. Near misses was the lead KPI. This positive intervention was the KBI. Okay, Emma, do you want to split people into teams?
Yep, so we've got 2 groups of 5 and 2 groups of 4. Is that okay?
Good, perfect.
Okay, so 5 minutes?
Yeah, just 5 minutes, just a quick exercise.
Here we go.
Do I need to stop sharing or?
You could do. I'm just going to write down those questions into the chat so everyone's got them. 1 second. haven't put Erin and May into groups. I don't know if you want to go into groups or you can stay with us.
By the way, it's Mai.
Sorry.
Mai and Erin, you okay going in a group?
Yeah, I'm okay either way.
Yeah, they're fine. They're good. Go ahead and put them in.
Yeah, okay.
Got a few guys haven't gone in, but they might be resting.
Yeah, I know, I can see that. They've been assigned.
They might be not at their desk, maybe, where their screens are off, and so they're not there to accept it.
Okay.
That's probably what it is.
So my walking, Emma, is fast walking up and down hills. So 5 miles is an hour and 5 minutes.
Okay, that's a good amount of time.
If you see the hill I've got up, it's 800-foot elevation.
Well,
Hi, Dan. Did you get a thing to go into your group?
Somehow I got locked out. I mean, I got kicked out. I don't know.
I'll put you into a group.
Okay.
I had the same experience. As soon as I clicked join, it
It knocked me
completely
out of the
shut down
whole system.
Zoom.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Let me pop you
Oh.
back into a group. Okay, let's try again. Here we go.
All right.
Here we go.
Yeah, I had mispronounced Mai's name. So it's like my.
I knew I was thinking before I said it, and I knew I'd get the
I
wrong
know
one.
I did it too. She must be used to this a bit, but I'm gonna like.
It's not great, is it? Anyway.
Well, it doesn't look like Mai when you're looking at it,
Yeah.
so you can't spell it phonetically. But
Yeah, it could be Mai or May, couldn't it? I suppose.
yeah,
I think it's more like to be Mai because lots of people from sort of China, that region, have Mai as a name.
Mm.
All right, fantastic. Everyone's coming back. Just a few more to appear. So how do we get on? Who'd like to share what you came up with?
Nobody.
Nobody. I'm sure someone wants to share something.
If it's easier because we've got such a large group, I can just sort of point to one person from each group from my list.
Yeah, why? Let's do that.
Yeah, sorry to be so direct, but could we have Didier Rabino from group 1?
Yeah, he's being picked on a lot.
Thank you.
Yeah, good morning again. So as a KPI, lagging KPI, we selected turnover or retention, depending on which side that you want to take it.
Okay. Yeah.
And we were still discussing on the KBI. So we didn't land on the behaviors that we like to see in order to influence the lagging metric. So we didn't totally complete the homework. I don't know if it was really 5 minutes, but
Okay. Well, I could give you a behavior. It would be setting up a tier 0 management system, but we might have to spend half an hour explaining what that was.
yeah, I heard about that not too long ago I think in Florida from you, Peter. So
Okay. Ah, you saw that. Oh, well done. Yes. Okay. Well, I mean, if we think about what would generally speaking, people leave because they're dissatisfied. The largest reason for them being dissatisfied is usually their boss. So actually, what is the behavior of the boss that is disengaging the people? And it's probably around an authoritarian command and control set of behaviors. So the behavior you're probably looking for is the boss moving to more a coaching type style of management.
Yeah, more of a asking than telling, and listening. I would say listening and asking.
Yes.
Yes.
And hence we talk about in the people value stream the voice of the employee, and hence not just the voice of the customer, but the voice of the employee. And hence, if you've got servant leadership or coaching management leadership, you actually have to work with the individual to build their self-resilience and create psychological safety for them to want to find out and focus on what they need, etc. Okay, I'm going off on a tangent here. Let's take another group. Group 2.
Okay, group 2. Jeff Mays, if you wouldn't mind sharing.
So luckily my teammates had a better understanding of this than I did, but together we looked at our leading KPI was defects per million. And one example we talked about in terms of that was ingredient usage,
Okay.
waste. We struggled, and I did particularly with that. I'm sorry, that was a lagging KPI.
Right.
The leading KPI was the measuring those defects or those weights more frequently. So we didn't wait until the end.
Right.
We had an opportunity to make adjustments. And the behavior were the operators measuring weights and making appropriate adjustments to bring them back in within the standard.
So the behavior could be, as you say, it could be around the behavior to make sure they always did the measure at the right time.
Correct.
And the behavior is to always do something about it if there was a problem, either themselves or ask for assistance, etc. So actually, for each lag KPI, there could be more than one lead KPI. And for each lead KPI, there might be more than one KBI. And if you do that as a sort of tree, you sometimes find that one of the KBIs might impact on several of the KPIs. So for instance, a behavior to adhere to standards might hit several. So you might end up with something like that. And hence, if you look at the whole picture, that's one way to do it. Okay, team 3.
Team 3, Mark Newsom.
Emma, can you pick someone else? He had to take care of something.
Yes, could we have Kay Swartout? Sorry for the pronunciation.
That was good. That was a good attempt. It was a sort out. So we talked about the number of employee relation cases as a lagging indicator.
Right.
And we discussed whether or not attendance at training events would be an appropriate leading indicator, but that's still rather lagging because you're measuring the attendance at the event, and thought that maybe a better indicator might be observing the attendees in using what they learned from the training events.
Okay, so yeah, so there's some good thinking going on there, and if you look at learning systems, there's a method that looks at 4 levels of learning. So one is the sort of tick the box at the end of the exercise. Was that a good presenter? Which really tells you very little.
Right.
Tells you, have you been entertained, really? The second one is some sort of test. So that could be a multiple choice or, quick answers or something, which tells you, have you understood? But actually, if you really want to test whether or not it's been effective, you actually have to test, has it changed the behavior of the individual? And hence you might observe the behavior of individuals. Do they do something differently? And obviously the ultimate is, does it produce the result that you're looking for? So that might be some nice behaviors sort of in that 3rd and 4th area. So that's great. Okay, so last team.
Sarah Connolly. or Rachel Allen Ramos.
I see a Rachel.
Yeah, I'll go ahead.
Okay.
Okay, so we chose turnover, and then our lead KPI was measuring the number of check-ins and follow-ups with new hires to talk to them, see how they're doing, get their feedback. And then we struggled a bit with the KBI, but we mentioned a few different things, observing the number of people participating in the follow-ups, but then also looking at improvements with their job, you know, observing their behavior, seeing that they're more engaged. And then the result, of course, we would want, you know, lower turnover as a result of that. But
right.
I don't know if that's
Okay.
really
I
right.
think you're in the right direction. My temptation would actually to be more looking at the behavior of the boss of the new hire, which will be a more likely behavioral indicator of whether the hire would leave, because it's more likely to be their behavior. So if you think about it, how many people join an organization disengaged? Like not many. How many people are disengaged after 90 days? Quite a lot. So actually, what has the leader done or not done? In other words, what have they behaved or not behaved that has created a situation why the employee has become disengaged? That's the line of inquiry I would have. And obviously the answer in your business might be different from someone else's, or your department might be different from someone else's. So there's no easy, sometimes people say, just give me the list of KBIs and we'll go and do it. And I just sort of say, oh, it doesn't quite work like that. You know, I can give you some stuff that will be generally quite good, but it won't be the best. It won't be the ideal. Okay, thank you very much. So I think we're sort of getting it, but also it's not too easy. It's not too easy to get your head around this sometimes. So let's go back to the slides. Oops. Just get to the right slide. Okay, so we had this exercise. So so this is a full approach of developing KBI. If you want to read more about that, it's actually in this book. Maybe you can put this in the chat, Emma, The Essence of Excellence.
Yeah.
And in this book, myself and my colleague Chris Butterworth, who's another of the Shingo Fellows, we talk about combining strategy deployment and behavioral deployment. We call it behavioral and strategy deployment, and we think of them as going together. So if we're trying to do the behavioral deployment, the starting point is the principles, which could be the Shingo principles, or you might have your values in the organization. And through various conversations, this is understanding why this is important. You develop a set of behavioral norms, like we did in the example I did with Didier earlier. And then we try and make it as ideal as possible. And then, so that's forming behaviors. And then this is deploying them down into the organization so that they're impactful for all of the individuals. So if we think about an example of this, here's another example. We might have a behavioral norm such as we seek, listen, and act upon input from others, which actually could have been a behavior around some of the things, for instance, you were talking about, Rachel. So when an employee has raised something they're not happy about, did we follow up, or did it go unanswered, for example? So what we need to do to deploy it is, what if that's generally how we should behave, what does that actually mean specifically for a manager? So as you say, for a manager, they might come up and say, well, what it means to me is I visit the shop floor at least daily and always ask operators what their issues are and use this information to discuss improvements with my team leaders. So you can see it's very active. You know, we could see whether it happened, we could see whether it happened today, whether it happened yesterday. For example, team leader. I run daily meetings with my team where I encourage team members to share their ideas. We then decide which ones to work on and who should work on them. So what you can see there, there's various things within that list there's actually probably 3 or 4 behaviors going on in order to actually to do that. So I always run a team meeting. I'm always asking questions and encouraging people. I'm finding ways for introverts to contribute, and then when ideas have been raised, we discuss them in the team to decide which ones we're going to work on. So in other words, it's very engaging, very involving. And then for a team member, when my manager or the team leader is in my area, I'm always keen to talk to them, to share and discuss ideas which help me shape my thoughts for our daily meeting. So if you think about this, if you were doing something like the classic Ono chalk circle, you could stand on the shop floor for a few hours and you could observe these different types of people and see whether these behaviors were happening or not. So probably within a few hours, you get a pretty good idea of whether this was happening, whether everyone was doing it, what was working, what wasn't working, for example. And if you were then extending this type of thinking into some of the leader standard work, which might be spending time observing team meetings, just standing and watching on the shop floor, or actually having Gemba coaching, the sort of questions you might be asking, for instance, a team member is, when your manager visits your area, how do they talk to you? Do they talk to you? What do they say and do? And actually, these are the sort of questions that you should be having in your leader standard work. And these are exactly the sort of questions, if you did do a Shingo assessment, this is exactly the sort of questions that the assessment team would come and ask to test whether or not your organization was reaching the Shingo prize levels. So in other words, your leader standard work and the Shingo examiner stuff should be pretty similar sort of type of thing. Obviously, the leader standard work might be, and what are you going to do about it if you depends on the answer you get. So let's have a look at a real example. So this was actually the first time that I did this for real. And this was a bakery company. Lantmännen is the Swedish grain producers cooperative. So this is lots of farmers, and they had a downstream division called Unibake that they bought. And Unibake were bakery companies using the grain to produce bread, croissants, you know, etc., other cakes or whatever. And at the holdings company level, so this is at the grain farmer company level, they came up with 3 behaviors: openness, drive, and holistic view, which is all nice. It's very nice sort of strategic HR stuff, but it means absolutely nothing to the average production worker packing frozen Danish pastries into boxes on a production line in Bedford, England, because they're just so far away. So they realized this, so they then developed what they call their guiding stars. So will to win, drive performance, develop yourself, you can read them. And this is very similar to what many organizations have done in terms of creating the values. They look like this sort of thing here. The question is, what does that mean to the average person packing Danish frozen pastries? And the answer is not very much. So what they had is some good values, but they didn't have a way of deploying it. So the deployment that we looked at was into behaviors, and you'll see the different steps. So at this site, we actually gathered together the senior management team, and we developed a set of behavioral norms. And the site leader wanted, under the title, to have the term leading by example, because he wanted the senior leadership team to be leading this and showing by example. And they came up with a group of 7, which came out of these values, but heavily influenced by the sort of lean or enterprise excellence or sort of Shingo thinking that we were working with them. So you could see regular Gemba visits, the using the idea boards, regular informal catch-ups, etc. So the sort of things that you might think might be useful. So again, what does this mean to the average person on the production line? We're still in the not very much, because it's still quite a long way away, but this is still sort of a bit management speak. So what we did is we then went down. So this is like your strategy deployment to the local team. In this particular case, this was the quality, part of the quality team, and this part of the quality team was the final end of line inspection, if you like. So this lady here, she's the quality manager. So she was part of the team where we developed this. Inessa is the team leader for this group, and this is 2 of the 4 team members. You can just see the bakery oven there, and the bakery set. So this area, they cooked the frozen Danish pastries. So it was my favorite team because I used to go down and have fresh Danish pastries to eat. So this was this list, and we then discussed this, we shared them, we explained why we'd done this, we explained what they meant, and this could be done by the quality manager. And then we asked the teams, which of these behaviors do you think is most important to you, and which of these behaviors do you feel you perhaps need to work on the most? So in other words, we were giving them autonomy, but also a choice to make it relevant for them as well as autonomy. So they chose the 3 with the stars, and then basically we said, well, okay, what do these actually mean to you? So we actually then, to make the specific KBIs were done bottom up. So the team members then went through this analysis, which is a bit bigger here. And so you can see we got technical team member, so that's team member level. This is the team leader or the supervisor. And then we had the senior manager. And then when we got to this level, these were the 3 KBIs that we were looking at. You can see this got incredibly specific rather than this general regular Gemba waltz. What on earth does that mean?
That's not your fault.
Oh, I'll continue. So what you can see is you've actually got the names of people. Maybe you've got how often it's happening, who are you interacting with. Now, this is not absolutely perfect because this is the first time these people have done it. So we did it to be 80% ideal, if you like, but more important was to engage them and make them want to do it and feel part of the whole process. So then this was then typed up, it was put onto their daily management board. It then became part of their meetings, but only once a week because it was too frequent to talk about it every day. And then they had a conversation once a week for each of these KBIs, which were at the level for us, the level we're asking our boss, and the level we're asking our senior managers. So in other words, the specific behaviors were coming from what do you guys above us in the hierarchy need to do to support us? And hence, we had a conversation in the team, which wouldn't have involved the senior manager except on occasions. Was this working, yes or no? If it's working, on the board, we have a recognition area because we might particularly want to recognize someone for doing something well. If it's not working, then that basically means the system for improvement. This goes into the regular system of improvement. We raise a small ideas card. These are put on it. Something hasn't happened. So whether it was a technical thing that didn't happen, or in this case, a behavioral thing, and then obviously we decide what we're going to do about it. So in other words, the KBIs flow into the improvement system in the same way that missing a KPI or not hitting a target might have done. So that's the first example that we use this. This is another example. This is later. This is Nestle. This is actually the global R&D research center for confectionery products. So this is like Kit Kats and things like that. So basically we went through the development of what behavioral norms will be required. This was actually done with the senior management team and the management team. So the top 2 levels. So this is 150 people on this site. So this was a team of about 20-ish, roughly like that. So this is basically anyone who leads a team at any level were part of this exercise. The quality of the people at this site's very high. I think I'm not sure 100% of the people have a degree, but probably 90+% have a degree, and many people have PhDs in some. So what you can see, again, we followed the same way of thinking. The KBIs, or the behavioral norms, as we would say here, needed to be things that were really important for us based on what we were trying to achieve and what was working, what wasn't working, which KPIs had been successful or not in the past period. And there were also ones where the behavior was difficult for us, because there was no point putting a load of behavioral norms that we were already doing, because if we're already doing it, then we don't need to focus on it. So basically, you might think once a year, you might need to refresh this, because we might get really good at one, in which case we swap it with something else. So these were the things that we were, these were the behaviors. So we openly discuss mistakes and learnings. So there was a bit of a culture of hiding mistakes, like many organizations. We look around us for new ideas and ways of doing things. So how do you increase the rate of innovation? Innovation from other departments, from other businesses, from competitors, from going to conferences or workshops. Whenever we ask anyone to do something, we explain why. This was often because people are defensive if we don't understand the why. And in fact, one of the sayings of Shigeo Shingo is we should teach why rather than know why rather than teach know how, because actually once you understand the why, you're more likely to want to do it. We all support each other to take risks. There was a bit of a culture of no risk taking, which of course is good to a point, food industry and so forth, but it meant that they never really pushed themselves a bit. So you weren't getting the high innovation. Once they started interacting using this one, they rapidly developed, their major innovation was about plastic-free packaging for chocolate bars, which obviously was done for an environmental point of view, but they took some risks by looking at some high innovation things. Whenever we find a problem, we always get to root cause. Well, probably like many of us, we don't get as far to the root cause as possible. So people were jumping to a quick solution. So this was what the management decided were the 5 areas that we needed to work with. We then did this exercise. So this was actually one of the 2 pilot teams that we worked with. This is actually an engineering team who, for instance, were doing innovation on production lines that they would then take out to how to make the new chocolate bars or whatever they were. So you can see along the top were the 5 behavioral norms that we developed, exactly like we saw in the Lampmanen. So team member, this is middle manager, this is senior manager. So they were then deciding what did this mean to them in the same way. And then they would then take them into their, so this is a picture from the daily management work area where this has been put up. And we gave the teams the autonomy to decide how they do this. Do they want it as a PowerPoint slide? Do they want it as handwritten notes? And this team felt more tactile about handwritten notes, so they decided to do it like that. And as you can see, what they then did, so this is the Kit Kat and Yes team. So they were developing, I don't know if this is product or whether this is packaging, but anyway. And you can see they had chosen to prioritize these in their annual strategy formation session. They said, which behaviors do we particularly need to focus on in this team? And then you can see when they had their meetings, they would be putting what's working, what's not working, what ideas have we had, how can we do this better? So they decided to do it like this. And this is what we decided, we would call this KBI level 1. So KBI level 1 was a binary, yes, we're doing it or not. So you can see, like in this case, it's a yes or no. So yes, we're doing it, no, we're not doing it. So that's yes or no. So that was what we call KBI level 1. Very simple, very easy, but not as valuable as getting higher level KBI. And then this is actually the pilot plant. So the pilot plant is like a small production area where they tried out the new packaging or the new product. So it's if you like a small production hall. And this was the team working in that area that's called the site operations team. And what you can see here is they had chosen 3 of the behaviors to focus on. So you can see it has quite a bit of autonomy in the choosing. And again, so this is the senior manager, the middle manager people, and then the frontline people. And they developed what we called level 2 KBIs. So level 2 KBIs were actually a how often is this happening? So for instance, if you know, are we doing a Gemba walk? Have we done a Gemba walk this week? Well, yes, we did one Gemba walk by the senior manager of this week. Well, actually, we needed one once a day. So actually, it'd be useful to measure, were there 5 this week, or were there 2, or were there 1, etc. So you can see they put the number of, they actually put days of the week, and some things it was a yes or no. So level 2 became the how often. We need to be a little bit careful with the how often, because, you know, many times done not very well is not particularly good. So the level 3, which is what we were starting and working on just as lockdown happened, was taking this to a qualitative measure. So in other words, it wasn't a are we doing that behavior or not? It's a how well are we doing the behavior? So what we were doing here, so these were the behaviors, this is what it meant for one team member, for example. And then what we were looking at, well, what should we able to be seeing or hearing the team members talking about in meetings or between meetings, and what sort of coaching support, should we be providing? So what you can see, these 2 areas here is again getting us very much into what's the leader's standard work to improve the quality of the KPIs, which again is very similar to the sort of things that you'd find from a Shingo assessor coming around and asking these sort of types of questions. So that's a little bit about levels. So we're packing a lot into a short time here. The last thing I'm going to show you is just taking this into the whole daily management approach. So I showed you this slide from John Alder before, and this is the furthest forward that we've seen a company to take this. So this is a company that I've been working on a global basis, a company called ST Microelectronics. It makes semiconductors. This is a site in New Delhi, and it's mostly an R&D facility for developing new semiconductors. This is actually the HR team, and HR improvement comes under HR. So the champion for improvement of the site is the head of HR. The lean coach reports to the head of HR. So this is the focus of their meetings. So just as saying, you know, most of us would spend most of our time on tools, or maybe the system, or how we're doing on KPIs, and, you know, like such a thing. So what they say is, the thing we need to work on is the culture. So we're going to spend 60% of our time working on the culture. As you can see, it's a level 1 KBI. It's a yes or no. They've devised 4 KBIs, and each team has a different set of 4 they've decided for themselves. There is no behavioral norm. They've done it team by team, and they all have a little acronym. Theirs is HIVE, because they said the hive is the strongest structure, so we want to be the strongest structure. So we offer or seek help. We share directly. In other words, we have difficult conversations. Visual management board is we operate our own personal visual management board, or tier 0 management. And excellence, we share something that we think's really good. And 60% of their team meeting is sharing this, and the value is in the conversation, not in the yes no's. And then in their HR department, what they've done is they've divided HR into perhaps quite similar processes to perhaps any of you that are in HR environment. So this one, for instance, is the talent management. what you can see is they've drawn on the innovative skills of one of the team members who've drawn it up in cartoons. So they're all cartoons. And then each of these lines is the different processes. And then this is a measure of the A3 problem solving and reflections, and is it on track type of stuff, or this is the small just do it type improvements. So in other words, this conversation is 30% of the time. And if we get that right, and the processes we technically get right, and we're working on the right projects, the KPIs will come right. So this is more like your classic lag KPIs, which is only a quick look. And it's only by exception. If something's going wrong, okay, what didn't we get right in the behavior or the projects to make it work? So this is the only organization I've seen that's really gone as far as completely changing their whole improvement focus to be culture, systems, and tools. And that, I think, is the end of what I was going to share with you. Maybe we could take a couple of questions, and then we'll take a short cup of tea break, if there's any questions on that. I can see the "what on earth was he talking about" look on your faces. Anything? No? Helen, do you want to add anything from Shingo point of view? Sound okay?
Yeah, you did an awesome job, so I have nothing to add.
Yeah, Peter, you know me, I'm always translating for you.
Yeah.
But you might just re-highlight the leveling of the KBIs as people get started with them.
Okay. What I would do
going forward, and any next steps you might take.
Yeah, I mean, the leveling is sort of like added levels of sophistication. I would just start with the yes or no. And the more important is than the yes or no is, if it's a yes, who do you need to recognize? If it's a no, what are you going to do about it? And I would just focus on that, which is what we saw at Landman. And really, that's the starting place. And then I wouldn't get into the level 2 and the level 3 till you're a few months or even a year or so. My level 2, maybe, you know, give it a year, move on to level 2, give it another year and move on to level 3. So I would leave that. I wouldn't rush into that. Any more? I think we've got people wanting cups of tea to me.
And a biscuit.
And a biscuit.
And a biscuit.
Or what was the cake that the McKee guys make, Cheryl, you were telling us about?
Honey buns and oatmeal cream pies. And
did you guys bring those to pass around or not?
Guess we can't do that virtually.
Okay. All right.
We had a lot of sweet company. A lot of the companies talked about today were bakeries and sweets. So
yes. Exactly.
All right, so we're going to be back in 10, and then Mai is going to lead us up, right? So I know several of you are anxiously awaiting.
Okay, so we make 22 past then.
22 past the hour.
Okay, see you in a minute. Bye, everyone.
We are up. All right, so Mai, are you ready? So as we get started, I just want to tell you where the work partly came from. Melissa Smith is here. She's the HR manager for Gentry, Arkansas, of the McKee Foods Group. And she said she had this really cool work to show me. So she showed me some of Mai's work, which is based upon, you know, what I call empathy-based continuous improvement. And I was so, I just literally fell in love with it. Like at first glance, I just loved it. And to quote Mai, I often say, it's like it gives you, it's like a gut punch with what you need to focus on. It's not just like, I think we need to do something. It's like your whole body responds to it. So it's got a lot of punch to it. So I'm real excited for, Mai's going to show you what they're doing and how they're doing it. She's very innovative. So Mai works in the talent acquisition area, and also is just one of those leaders that's trying new things and very experimental in nature. So I think you'll enjoy that, and then we'll have Erin Cole after that. And Melissa will chime in after my shares what the approach is. And I think all of you will find it interesting as well. So with that, Maya, are you ready to go? You can grab the screen if you want. Got anything you wanted to share?
I'm ready. Okay, so can you see my screen?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so we started this probably a couple months ago with following up with new hires. And our new hires range from being employed here from 2 months to 4 months, within that range. And so we gathered about 30 new hires for this project. And so you're probably wondering, you know, what's the purpose of this follow-up? So the purpose of this follow-up was to review our current hiring process with new hires to help identify any gaps or issues that we have. And our goal was to co-create a perfect experience for our future new hires in this process. So, you know, how are we going to do that? How can we get new hires to talk to us about their experience that they've had, especially when it's your process? And for those that are introverts, how are you going to get those people to talk? So I want to share a very powerful quote by Maya Angelou, and I strongly agree with this quote, and I'm going to read it to you because I want you to get it. People will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. So I may forget word for word what you have said to me, I may have forgotten what you did to me, but how you made me feel in that specific time or moment, I will always remember that. And so that's a very, very powerful quote that I strongly agree with. And I took that quote and I asked myself this question. I said, what can you use this to express your thoughts and your feelings without using words? So what can you do to express? So with new hires, how can they express their thoughts and feelings if they can't open up to you? What can you do? When someone's stressed and someone's going through mixed emotions and feelings, how do they cope with that? And many things come to my mind. Art, music. Sometimes it could be just a walk in the park, dancing. So all of those came into my mind. And then I took that and I'm like, okay, so how will I get my new hires to express their feelings and their emotions about my hiring process to me without fear, and with, you know, and being able to just be open and honest with me. All right. So with that, I decided to use what's called a visual explorer. So you're probably wondering what that is. It's the use of images to facilitate a conversation between you and another person, or you and a group. And there's a variety of ways you can use it, or what you can use it for. I decided to use it for the experience purpose, because that's what I'm solely wanting to know is how was these new hires, what was their experience like coming into McKee Foods. So I broke down my process into 4 parts. We have the application process, our hiring process, onboarding, and our training process. So with each of these processes, I asked the new hires to choose a picture that best describes their experience in each of these processes. And so in the application process, that's where from the time that the employee or the new hire have applied to when they were actually scheduled for an interview. And these are the pictures that we have captured from new hires that they've selected themselves. And right by the pictures or next to the pictures are what we capture, the notes that my assistant and I have captured as far as, you know, what was said and why they selected a certain picture. And so what I want you to do is I want to go ahead and share some of these pictures with you and the notes that that comes with them. And while I'm sharing these with you, I'm going to go ahead and let you read them yourself, because with me reading it to you, you don't get that powerfulness from it rather than having you read it yourself. So I'm going to give you a couple of seconds to read through these examples of some of the pictures that we've have selected for the application process. All right, so now we're going to go to the next one. All right, and then one more. So that was the application process. So we went back and we asked the new hires to select a different picture that best describes their experience for the hiring process. And the hiring process is from where they got their interview to the day before orientation. So not counting orientation, but the day right before orientation. And these are the pictures that we've captured. And then also with the notes that we've captured from what they've said and why they selected. And I'm also going to show you a couple of those examples of the pictures and the notes as well. And again, read on your own. All right, next one. All right. So same thing, we did that with onboarding. And onboarding is just solely the orientation process. So it was the 2-day orientation. And these were the pictures that we have captured along with the notes. And I'm going to show you 4 examples from this one. Okay. And then the last one was the training process. So that's where they actually had their meet and greet with the supervisor or their trainer, and they actually were out on the floor training. And again, these are the pictures that were selected along with the notes that we've captured. And I'm also going to share some of those with you as well. Last one. Okay, so as you can see from those notes that we've gathered and the pictures that they selected, even though we were solely focused on their experience, we were able to seek patterns from that. We were able to have the undiscussable, become discussable, and we were able to get the emotions and the feelings that new hires were going through at that time. And so from that, what did we do? What did we do with their feedbacks? So basically what we did was we went ahead and we met with each department that was closest to the process and reviewed each of these feedbacks for patterns and gut punches and what we can do to improve our process. And so with the application process and the hiring process, that was something that my assistant and I had control over. So we met together and we came up with, any process improvement that we needed to do, any changes that we needed to do, or if there was any of the good things, we would continue to do. And then same thing with onboarding process and the training process. We met with those that were closest to that process and discussed, what changes we need to do or any improvements that we needed. So in the application process, we are going to plan to move to one application for the same job with shift preferences. So that is our goal. And we have reduced our job postings to 2 weeks. And this is just to surely, ensure time response to applicants. And so in the hiring process, we have reduced the wait time for background checks, and we have addressed the medical issues by improving communications and expectations around our medical release. And then as far as in the onboarding process, we are evaluating the use of AI, artificial intelligence, to reduce orientation contents. And with pandemic restrictions lifted now, we are planning to add plant tours back to our orientation. And then as far as in training process, we currently have supervisors that are attending our orientation. So that way there is a smooth transition into production. So this will help supervisors have knowledge of what's covered in orientation and what needs to be covered in meet and greet before they go into production to train. And so with that, there are a lot of things that we've learned within this process, and I want to share those with you. And so, image can be used as a communication tool. Not a lot of people think that, But for me, I saw it as a communication tool. You have introverts, or you have those that don't really want to speak, or they're afraid to speak. But if you have an image for them to talk through an image and express their feelings and their emotions that they're going through, or their experience that they're going through, it is so powerful, way much powerful than just to have you sitting in the room with someone trying to ask them questions. Sharing your results with the department that's closest to that process is so helpful, because these gut punches can be used as motivations to improve their own process. And then we need to stay committed with our new hires, follow up with them, you know, have it a routine where you continuously follow up with them, make sure that you're doing well, check up on them, let them know what changes we have made. And last thing, just be humble. It's okay to not be perfect. You know, with every process, there's always continuous improvement that needs to be done. And, you know, we've learned a lot from this process. And I hope you guys learned a lot from that process as well.
Thank you, Mai. Melissa, what would you like to add to that in terms of how it's impacted your team, or what your thoughts on this?
I would just add there's quite a buzz around the display that Mai showed you. We have it filling a conference room. And while we've done focus groups in the past and made great improvements from just discussions with employees, I feel what Mai and her assistant, Justine Kyle, what they did to elevate that. They leveled it up by coupling that discussion with the picture. And I think it elevated the impact both for the new employees. Again, Mai described how it made it easy for them to open up. They can talk about themselves, but through a picture, so it made it safer. And then the impact on the stakeholders, our customers, the supervisors, when they read what their process or behaviors, how they were being received by new employees, they were able to internalize it somehow. In fact, we had a supervisor just last week, a production supervisor. They were part of a class, but they went down, they were reading the information. I had described the project to them. When that was done, he said, I'm not doing that. He said, I'm not checking in on my new employee every day. I didn't introduce them to their team members. And you assume they know to do that, but they get busy and they forget. So it just really helps them experience, you know, just the impact of their behaviors by seeing it presented that way. Anyway, so I just think making those connections, and then like Mai said, looping back, she and Justine were in here on Sunday talking to another new set of employees. So it just, you know, perpetuating this, making tweaks to it, adjusting it, I just think it's exciting. So
it is exciting. All right, any questions? We were going to maybe have a discussion question for the group. Mai, what was your thought on a discussion question?
Sorry, I was on mute, sorry. I'd like to know how you can use this approach with any of your current process that you are struggling with right now, or you know, what can you do as far as using this approach?
Do we want to do that in smaller groups? How much time? We have about 10 minutes. Miss Emma?
Sorry, yeah, we can do that in smaller groups. For about 10 minutes, that's fine.
We'll do 8 minutes, then we'll stay on track.
Okay, perfect. I'll just put you into groups now.
Maybe 3 groups.
Okay.
Can you clarify the assignment before you send us to the small groups?
how could you use images or empathy? What this is creating is like by connecting to how the person feels, it's driving the improvement. So where could you use a similar approach of driving improvement in any of your areas? A good cut, make it more clear.
Okay, 8 minutes. Okay.
Yeah.
Here we
And
go.
I'll go ahead and join a group.
Okay.
Cool.
That was good. We have enough time for just each group to just briefly, I guess, share maybe any highlights of what you guys talked about. Is there group one? Emma, who's somebody from?
Florian, if you wouldn't mind sharing from group one, thank you.
Yes, so we discussed way that we used visual or pictures in order to discuss and problem mostly or conflict. We also discussed how it could be applied in production or operation settings. So we had a couple example, and also Peter showed us another way to use images and yeah, about the psychological safety person or situation. So it's a card game where you can find action and how it will impact the psychological safety based on the character behind the card. So yeah, we discussed that it can be used in a team setting to solve conflict or to at least arise some issues and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I summarized it properly, but if you want to add something more, we can do it.
Anyone else from that group? If not, who's from group two?
So group two, Lizanne.
Hi, yeah, it was very interesting listening to the people speaking and how they felt that the images allowed people to receive the feedback in a way that was really impactful and less challenging and might bring up less kind of resistance than using words would do. And people were kind of applying it into onboarding and induction conversations. But we were talking about that the application could really be for feedback in relation to any aspect of recruitment. What struck me when I was listening to people was that I felt a little bit jealous, if I'm honest with you, at the level of maturity that there seems to be in their organizations in terms of being open to receiving feedback. I think I have a whole layer of work to do on that before I can get to this part. But it's motivated me to do that work, to think that I could get to this bit. That's what I took from it.
Yeah, nice. There's one more group.
Yep. Dan Erskine, if you wouldn't mind sharing. Thank you. You're on mute, Dan.
So we talked about different areas that we have used these in. Some of us have used them in different environments and also for different purposes. So even from visioning, but also from how we've used them in operations of how management or individuals are sensing the culture and then what they would like it to be. I think Melissa used it for visioning and others. So we talked about the value of it, the experience that the individuals had, and then the data that you can receive from it. But it just seemed that it was an easy way to ask It's easier for somebody to pick out a picture is what we talk about, and to explain instead of just asking them a straight question. For some reason, it really accesses a different part of your brain is what we've found, that you can talk about your experience and have behaviors. Now, we also talked about how we've seen trends. I mean, you would see people picking the same type of pictures and actually having the same type of experiences, and then how we would move that into problem solving.
Yeah, really good. So just to close that up, I thought there was some great discussions. One of the things also mentioned in the group I was in was that, you know, they had done these kinds of things before and found improvements, but there wasn't always the energy to make them happen. And it really boosted the energy to make the changes. So it was like really more motivating as people felt the pain of it, then they were like, it's gotta change. So I thought there aren't that many things I've seen that I think make that follow-up list more vibrant, more alive, more, you know, moving from a feeling level instead of like it's the right thing to do. We have a list of things to fix. So really good. All right, our second is like kind of, it's on the same idea of the use of empathy to drive improvement. We're going to have Erin Cole share with us the use of technology. She first explained this to me. I was like, really? Like we can all just let the computer or let technology do the work, and we'll just have to just get it loaded up and step back. And I think actually Mai mentioned this idea. So Erin, if you can just share with us, you know, the kind of software you're using and how does it use how people feel to drive improvements?
Yeah. So do you want me to share my deck?
Yeah, you can, and might want to just, I guess I should have told a little bit. Erin handles for Discover the orientation and the training around people getting onboarded, making sure they learn all the things. How many people do you onboard a year, Erin, in Discover?
I manage all of the training and onboarding for our field employees, and it's kind of a call center sort of industry, and probably somewhere between 4 and 8,000 a year. So people. Yeah, really high volume for sure.
Yes.
Let me make sure that I am going to share the right screen here. Sorry. There we go. Okay, so hi, like Cheryl mentioned, my name is Erin Cole. I manage onboarding and learning and development at Discover. And, you know, with such high volumes of onboarding, especially in the call center industry, you know, I love everything that's been shared around, you know, already so far around understanding the employee experience and using that feedback, actually taking action on the feedback to deliver just more meaningful experiences for your employees. You know, one of the things that really ties in, especially, you know, working for a company like Discover, is how many people that it is that we're hiring, and really still being able to provide an individualized experience and understand an individual's needs when you're looking at something with such high volumes. So, you know, the learning landscape is from a training and development perspective, HR in general, just employee experience, all of the pieces of data that come together. And that's what we're kind of talking about when it comes to technology and empathy, is understanding data and what information you need and how you would use that information. And so, you know, when it comes from a learning and development perspective, there's so many systems, your human systems that, you know, keep track of employee information, and then the learning systems on how you deliver and administer, you know, reporting and analytics, and all of those things are increasingly complex. But XAPI is a modernized way of kind of bringing all of those things together and helping those systems interact, and then being able to provide you with meaningful information and data about your employees. So I'm going to kind of go into that a little bit. This is kind of a visual of, seeing all of these different systems that, from an HR perspective, an employee experience perspective, an orientation perspective, we're all using all of these different methods to administer things and track data, and, and experience technology and XAPI is kind of how those things come together in the most meaningful way. It is a platform that is more intuitive, personalized, visual even, in terms of looking at different groups of employees. And that's what we'll kind of start to talk about, is how does this all come together, and what does it look like to kind of get to this point? So, the new platforms are meeting the employee on their level and where it is that they are working from or doing their learning from in the method that they prefer. So it's about providing that flexibility, in those different work experiences and environments to meet the employee where they are and based on their preferences. So, learning management systems have been around for a really long time, and they are good at, administering a structured training, administering a structured group of topics, and collecting all of the records around the employee experience or the learning path that you may have created, or capturing assessment scores for proficiency and compliance reasons. But what they're not really doing is capturing the experience, the emotions, and taking it to the next level and really doing anything with it. And so that's where experience technology comes in, is by doing, making that connection and kind of the analysis of what's happening with the employee. So kind of the first, piece to understand is really what the employee experience is. And so, probably one of the most common ways is doing some journey mapping and really identifying some critical aspects and touch points in the life cycle, whether it's throughout someone's day or whether it's throughout the entire employee life cycle, from application to when they're leaving. So really looking at the core of the employee experience to understand what happens, their thoughts and feelings around what's happening, and how to take action to improve where you may have gaps or specific challenges or opportunities to overcome. So, this is kind of just a visual example of, at different points, we have to understand what those critical touch points are for an employee. And experience technology really enables us to see and even understand what some of those critical touch points are, without the employee having to even provide that information. It could be done through visuals. I love, that as a realistic way of the employee being able to evaluate how they're feeling. But what we also need to understand is what they're doing. And that's kind of where experience technology comes in. A simple example of this is, we give employees a lot of information on day one. We know they go through this emotional kind of roller coaster, but what's happening on day 13, right? We always talk about day 1, day 30, day 90. What's happening on day 13? And when you think about kind of that change curve that, people get really excited and then they have that dip. What we need to understand is what's causing that dip. What are they doing during that dip? How are they feeling during that dip? And, day 13, for example, that's when they're, using experience technology. You start to understand what are the articles on your intranet site that they're looking for? What are the topics on your HR portal that they're starting to look for? What's the training that they're starting to look for? What questions are they starting to have, so that we know and can respond proactively instead of reactively based on what that employee's feeling and experience is. So on day 13, if the highest click rate that we're tracking through the experience technology, if the highest click rate is your HR article for benefits enrollment, if we know that that's the highest rate that that's happening is on day 13 because our analytics are giving us that data, then taking action and understanding a critical touch point in that employee's life cycle looks like knowing this article they always see on, most people are looking for on day 13. It means proactively pushing that article to them on day 11. And really understanding what their needs and their wants are, and being able to make life easier for them by being proactive, using some of that data and seeing what it is that's happening, and using those things to push things forward and keep the momentum going, keep the positive flow, and do it before they even know that they need it. So that's kind of where some of this experience technology and analytics really comes into. So what does that look like? How do you even start? It all sounds great, but like, where do you go? Where do you start with it? So really it begins with kind of understanding what your business strategies are. What's your vision? What's your mission? What's your values? What are your driving factors? What's your brand? So that you know exactly what behaviors you're really looking for. And, that's what we were talking about earlier with those KBIs, is what are the behaviors that you're looking at from your employees at certain points in time, and how do you want them to reflect in your brand? Especially when we know, and, I support call centers, and the highest turnover, average turnover in call centers is probably, it's somewhere around 35 and 40%. And emotional exhaustion, organizational pride, manager support, and career growth are some of the biggest things that are, driving the reasons why employees turn over. So we need to know what it is that we're doing as a business and where we're trying to go, to understand how our job roles are set up to specifically interact and drive our business forward. So identifying the critical roles, and that's, looking at certain employee profiles, whether it's managers, entry-level employees, executives, different, just, depending on how you want to categorize and kind of start collecting that data to be able to build the personas. And I'm going to show you some, a little bit of examples of what this looks like. Determining maybe it's not time to invest in new technology, but we still need to get the feedback. We still need to understand how to implement it. We still have to figure out how to continuously improve on it. And, there are kind of simple ways to get there. So this is really, showing a super basic example of creating a journey map, and based on a customer or a employee persona, to really understand what is their experience. We need to kind of know what is the timeline we're looking at, what is the employee profile that we need to understand. We need to know, what are they doing? How do they feel about it, to know what action we want to take. So this is kind of a, really basic, from a conceptual perspective, example of journey mapping, how they're thinking, how they're feeling, what issues are they experiencing, how are we collecting that feedback, and what impact do we want to take. Here's a more detailed example of really getting granular at the employee level and understanding someone's feelings, emotions, and experience throughout their day. So this is a manager. We know where she's located, how much she's working, her tenure with the organization, but we're looking at her satisfaction throughout the day on this, smiley face and frown face, just sort of roller coaster of what is happening at different things. And by being able to see what's happening and how someone's feeling at different points throughout the day can determine how we do things operationally in our companies, in our businesses, and how we handle things with our employees. So, for example, if you see that commonly for this persona of our employees, this is the point in the day that they really hit a low, and it's kind of consistent. What we would want to do is take a look at, is there something that's causing that? Do we want to make shifts in when standing meetings are, or when certain organizational announcements and information go out that it could be positive, or maybe we're apprehensive about how our employees are going to feel about it. Maybe we need to do something to change up their day, like pushing a great new opportunity or new job recommendations to them at certain points of the day where it may be more beneficial to drive their engagement or increase their satisfaction at that point of the day. We absolutely wouldn't want to send out a notification that everyone needs to work overtime due to call volumes at the lowest point in their day. And so it's about being able to use this kind of information to help drive your business and understand how your employees are feeling about things, and kind of use that in a way that benefits both of you to actively keep those employees engaged, at different points throughout the day where they may be losing motivation or engagement. So I'm going to skip back really quick. This example just shows you an example of one person's day and kind of looking at that. This example is showing you that same experience, but with a third category attached to it. And some of these things aren't even with incorporating, advanced technology and XAPI, but really still taking the concepts of what that technology can do and being able to apply them at a very simple level initially, even if you need to do something like a proof of concept and say, and now we can automate this with XAPI or things like that. So, you can see what's happening, how they're feeling, and the actions you want to take really clearly, and hitting on each of those areas and really being able to focus on that compassionate empathy in the employee experience. So seeing what simple actions you can take, like, okay, if this is the problem, they had some assumptions, let's try to change that and make sure that we're reiterating certain information at that point, or different things. Are there things that are within our control that we can fix to make their experience better? So if you are at a point that you're ready to invest, that you're ready to automate, that your employee population numbers are so high that doing manual intervention just isn't the most resourceful decision, experience technology using XAPI, learning experience platforms. There's also onboarding experience platforms, and they all kind of do the same thing from an experience perspective. They personalize, they automate, they analyze and improve. That is absolutely the intent of kind of this sort of technology, by making things more individual, more specific, based on certain ways that you can build out that experience, whether it is pushing certain things you need to get to them, or allowing them to be more self-sufficient and sustaining from that perspective. I kind of put this together because I like that in general, regardless of your industry, regardless of your organization size or type, there's just some common challenges that people face and our companies face when it comes to how do we do that? How do we do that for individuals? And we know what the issues are in keeping people engaged, in helping them through their changes and career pathing throughout those critical points of the employee experience. But how do we make it relevant and specific and simple, where it doesn't cost us all of the resources in order to do all of that? And that is exactly where experience technology comes in, is kind of by offsetting some of those challenges that we just can't manually solve for. So in general, experience technology kind of works in one of two ways, where you can provide and create a pathway of actions and tasks that someone completes, and building out some if-then scenarios. If they complete this successfully, then push the next thing on to them. But if they didn't, how do we make everyone's lives easier? Because we know manager support is one of the reasons why people leave. So how do we bring the manager into that employee's process and experience? We automate the notification by notifying the manager, notifying the training specialist by saying, hey, your new employee who's sitting in their new employee training didn't pass this required assessment, or they took double the amount of allotted time to complete this task, and you may want to intervene and provide some coaching or check in on them. It's being able to kind of combine all of that in an automated way by building out this personalized pathway that incorporates multiple roles into the process to really automate and refine that individual employee's experience. The other thing that experience technology kind of does from, how does it benefit us us as managers, us as HR professionals, us as, leaders, in addition to the experience that our employees are getting, the analytics are more automated. They're looking at lots of different things and actually generating for you the dashboards, the reporting, the drill down capabilities. And then you also have the ability to kind of write specific statements that you want to ask to collect certain pieces of data. That's kind of writing an XAPI statement, is really understanding what data is it that you want to collect. Do you want to know something like, when answering an assessment question in a training course, which question is it that everyone is most commonly getting wrong? But in addition to that, what is the answer that they're always selecting in lieu of the correct answer, so that you can understand your content and improve it by saying, you know what, maybe this is actually worded a little bit incorrectly, or maybe the verbiage in the detractor in the question is a little bit ambiguous or vague. So we should really clean this up on our end, because it maybe is misleading in a certain way, but the analytic aspect of it is kind of pushing and pulling that information for you, by you identifying what data you want, and then being able to have that data coming back so that you can make improvements, and those improvements ultimately are driven for how to improve the experience for your employees, so that they don't feel frustrated when they don't get that assessment question correct, but they know they know this topic, and that kind of more personalized experience. So I know I've said a lot, and I know that can be a lot of high level, but I am totally happy to answer any questions or share some, other examples or different kinds of scenarios if anyone has any questions or thoughts.
Any questions, thoughts?
Hey, Erin, this is Jeff. I have a question around the LMS, LXS systems. Are they standalone, or do you find that you need one before the other?
You know what? That is totally a good question. I'm going to jump back to this to kind of show you how some of these things connect. Oh, that was not. Let me get back to it. So there are multiple ways you can kind of go about it from a, you know, where my company kind of was and where we ended up transitioning to is we had an LMS, the learning management system of you know, putting the content into the system and it providing us and tracking the learning records. With XAPI technology and experience technology, there really is this entire ecosystem that kind of comes together. All of the pieces of it are, you know, kind of connected. It depends on really what your focus is. And so if you have a stronger compliance aspect where there's a bit more black and white and critical, you know, training or delivery that kind of needs to happen, that's a strong suit of a learning management system. And learning experience technology is kind of, if you want to take that and then personalize it and not have to drive things in such a structure or kind of linear way, you can jump right to an experience technology. It can also depend on where your content is being created from. If it's, you know, being created in-house and because it needs to go through all the levels of approval and it has to be very, you know, structured in that way, an LMS is kind of a stronger place to start. But in an area like we have about 4,000 engineers who create our software that our employees use, but also that our customers use. And the learning on that end of our organization completely started through experience technology because all of our engineers were self-authoring their content. They were doing social learning. They were getting credits for the content that they were creating. And that just built the library of things that they were learning from, and then starting to push that sort of content out to other people saying, you have this job title and this job role, here's content that other people, you know, in your same role or job title are also looking at and are interested in. So which direction you kind of start with really can depend on kind of what sort of, you know, your industry organization is and what sort of content it is that you really need to deliver. There really isn't a requirement of one or the other. It's just more what's suited to what your needs of your employees and your audience are.
Really good. Thanks, Erin. If there's another question, let us know. We're starting to be like, we just need to kind of move on with our timeline and get everyone out on time. You guys have had great patience this morning. Erin, that was a great presentation. Even I took tons of notes. Yeah, so really good. Any other questions or comments before we move on to the last topic of the day, which actually, Erin, is a perfect lead into what I'm going to go over next is how to develop an empathy map. Some of you might be like, I get this big, robust approach with technology, very powerful, but the tool I'm going to share is something any of you can do. So what I'd like to end with is like, yep, I could do that. I could do it this afternoon. You can do it right now. And it's from a book called Agile HR, which I don't find that many HR books I fall in love with, but this one so this is the use of Agile specifically towards HR. So these concepts are certainly used elsewhere. They had certainly been used in software industry. They've been used in marketing and other areas. But what they're talking about in there is this building of the personas. How do we think about that experience mapping? How do we think about that? How do we design experiences? How do we build those personas? And then I'm going to show how to do an empathy map related to onboarding. And every group we've worked this through has said, even if, I mean, first of all, empathy is my long suit, one of my long suits. Even with the strong suit and empathy, every time I build a map, I'm like, oh, I see things I just don't see until I do it that way. So this is a tool you can take and use. Some of you may know about this. Some of you, I guess our goal is to make sure everybody here today gets introduced to what this is. So I'm going to start with, so it comes out of the field of design thinking and agile development. So I'm not going to teach this necessarily, but I just want to give you a sense. That's what it roots to, the idea of what is that business challenge? How do we then dive into that experience, discover the moments that matter? What is the problem? Does it need to be solved? We then identify options and look at our assumptions, prioritize what those solutions are and test those out and see if it's delivering on that. So that's what general design thinking is. So you may or may not use personas, but when I show you the empathy map, the purpose of this is getting more clear what would be the differences between people. The way some organizations do this differently, if you were to want to do this even in a facility, you don't have to do it organization-wide, you would interview people. And so even in some of our workshops, we've really literally built personas and they start to show commonalities. What I have learned is be careful of thinking people in like parents, like if we have employees of a similar age group with kids, that they're all the same. The personas may show like, that's not really the cutoff of things that might matter to you, either in their benefits or how do we tailor their onboarding or how do we tailor their career planning processes. So your idea is through interviews, start to establish some groupings that are helpful to you based upon whatever you're applying it to. So that's how they're built. Then I want to show you, here's the map. So similar to partly what Erin was pointing out, what we do, this is an example of onboarding. We just look at literally, I found this super helpful, even when you almost go like minute to minute, how that day kicks off. You know, I've now seen several organizations use this. In this example here, the person walks into reception. They wonder, so when the group considered it, we said, well, it's probably not obvious to them what happens next. They're obviously probably a little nervous, that little bunny rabbit feeling. And what are they saying? They're being polite. So they're not saying how they're feeling. They're just saying hello and thank you. But inside they're wondering what's happening. Then they sit at a desk. That's their norm there. And they said, you know, a lot of times people may be missing things they're needing. So they're kind of, maybe they come to a fairly empty desk. Likely might be disappointed. I certainly don't have what I need when I get started, and they might be quiet, so they aren't saying anything. Then they go to the orientation. This has been a common area groups have improved when they've all weighed out on what they think that orientation experience is. A lot of it is overwhelm, and they may, or if they're saying anything, they're probably just asking some questions. And then in this group happen to be in the afternoon, they spend their afternoon filling out paperwork. Which they know nobody likes, and it's frustrated, confusing, and they're quiet. So the big questions, anytime you map this, so you could do this on your own for your organization. It could be the days coming before you come in, or literally how that first day goes. It could be more than that. But I found it super helpful about actually fairly small periods of time. It'll illuminate things that don't show up elsewhere. So where do you see the opportunities to improve, and where are the moments that matter? So when you guys look at this map, where do you see the opportunities, the moments that matter in this day? From coming in the door to sitting at their desk, where do you see any of the moments that matter in the first day of employment?
I think all four, because their feeling for all four is negative feelings.
Yep. Where do you think is one of the bigger moments that matters? Out of the four, what's probably the biggest one? There's not a right answer to this. I'm just asking you how it strikes you.
I think, it's if you want to maintain the connection. If you disconnect at the very beginning, it's difficult to catch up after. So I would say the step one, it's it's easier to degrade than to upgrade. So
right, that first impression, it's like that moment you come in. So several of the groups I've seen do this have fixed things like they're sending videos ahead of time of the parking lot. to help you get clear outlines about what to expect in the day. And if you're going to get lunch or not get lunch, so do you need to bring a lunch? So they're really attempting to answer a whole lot more questions and try and ease in that first even 10 minutes of arrival to the person knowing where you're going to go. You're going to go to reception, your manager's going to come, and then these 4 things are going to happen that day. And here's how to be ready for that, to keep reducing that. So that's an example. And again, group after group after group has all said, we could probably strengthen the literal first day, the literal first step coming in the door. So that's an example of it. Next, I just wanted to mention, this can be used for other things too. So as I got to build this, all you need to do this is a chart. You can put it in Excel, you can put it on a piece of paper, you can draw it in pen. It does not need to be fancy. It's not software based. It's simply a chart. You go left to right with chronologically what's happening. And then for each step, you're asking, what is the person doing? Then you start to say, and sometimes this is where the persona is. You might say, the first day for a bunch of people that are new grads from college might be different than people who have worked 20 years, you know, with a lot of time elsewhere in their first day, or maybe the first day working in one type of a job or another. So this is where you might map more than one persona. So what are they doing, thinking, feeling, and saying? Look for the moments that matter. And then what are your opportunities to improve and move it from there. One of the best stories for me personally that I saw is we had a woman who had accepted a position and then had a couple-month wait for different reasons before she was going to start. When we sat back and built the map, and this was like the senior team building it, there was like this realization of what was she likely feeling in the 2 months, which would be a lot more probably of letting go of the current team, and certainly not a lot of good feelings about what was about to happen. She would have a couple months of really living in the space of being with the team she'll be leaving. So what did they do? They built a basket of all of her favorite things. They went to the recruiter and someone else who knew her, and they found all the things she loves in life. They built her a basket of those and sent those over, and then booked a lunch for her and her team, like, I don't know, still a month out. So they did things to strengthen that connection for her to the new team during that period of her mostly still working somewhere else. So that's, to me, an example of things like you just probably wouldn't think about that if you really weren't thinking about much examining how she feels. And then, so this is all it takes to do it. Now, here's an example. You can use this for all kinds of experiences. I had a leader who was saying they were doing strategy deployment, having their kickoff meeting with their teams, hadn't gone well. Wasn't clear why, but he was saying like they left, he could tell they were not happy with this. So he simply took, you can build one of these in 5 or 10 minutes. He mapped out what had happened. He mapped out what he then stood back and realized they were probably thinking at which stage, how they felt, which matched how they left and what he observed, and then what had they said throughout it. And then lo and behold, he said, I see how this happened. I can see here, it was the way I went through it. This kind of thing, it's all set. What do you think is not really feel collaborative. And so it's no wonder they're kind of barely going to voice their concerns the way it came across. It had all been decided. Then when they did voice concerns that they didn't think it was achievable, he realized it's the way I responded to them. I really didn't give more time and space to review those concerns. He then rebuilt his approach. He did it again. He fixed what things didn't work, and it ended up much better. But what I like, it just took 5 or 10 minutes to build this map for him to see really what would be different about it. So it was just an example I wanted to share with you today. The book has more. I think, Melissa, your team, I think, might have brought that book in some. But it's just, I just wanted to leave this topic of using empathy for improvement today with some thought about how you might build a map. I also had a continuous improvement team do this at a session a little bit ago. And I wasn't quite sure what they would make out of it. So first they did the onboarding, they did great. We had one team that was saying they get pushed on their internal teams to make improvement. They felt like, you know, they a lot of times get assigned to go fix that. They mapped out how they work with their teams, about how they felt. They mapped their journey, their own experience. They then identified every place they get discouraged or feel bad, and frustrated were obvious places that they could improve the way they were collaborating with people. And so then they redesigned that, but it was like, until they laid that out, it just wasn't obvious to them where it was coming off its tracks. So I think the lesson to that is when we have senses that people aren't responding well to a situation, I think sometimes laying out a quick map might be a way to figure out what's probably happening that's driving that response, and then what would I do about it? Definitely seen some nods. So I love this as just a quick and easy way you can do it anytime, any day. So I'm thinking, I'm open to having you guys talk through how to build one. And it's also been we've covered a lot of territory this morning. So I'm also okay if you want to share any thoughts on that, and then we can kind of close out. Thoughts? What would you like to do?
I'd love to reserve the right to call you after I create my first one.
All right, happy to do that. It's very fun. I think it's just literally, I don't know why I have so much fun with these, but I just really think they're a blast. I think it's because I'm more of an emotionally based person, so I think that's why this is so fun for me.
What's funny is I'm the opposite, but that's why I like it too, because I don't lead with emotion, so it helps me like make sure that I'm focusing in on that.
Yeah, that you can see it.
Yeah.
Yep.
I was just thinking about how Erin's use of technology, my use of conversations and pictures can merge in to build those personas. I mean, it's like inputs to getting the detail we need to build out that map. And anyway, it just all like connected, like, thank you.
Yep. And the book also provides fairly detailed kind of how-to instructions. If you're like, that's not enough for me to know what to do, I thought the book was helpful at being able to do that. Anyone else want to just share what you've gotten out of all of this morning? As Peter and I are just going to close with a little bit about next steps in the network. Thoughts, takeaways today? What was your biggest takeaway today? I hope you got something out of being here. You put some time in.
I think my biggest thing for me, it piqued my curiosity to look into all of these things more, because for me, some of it was a first introduction, and I need to understand, a little more about how to apply it, but looks like some real opportunities.
Yeah, that was our goal. So it sounds like, at least with you, we achieved our mission. Our goal was to pique your interest, get you going. Anyone else want to share what you got of it?
It's been a real learning experience for me. I'm in the process of putting in a behaviors framework and purchasing an LMS. Now I'm thinking maybe I'm not looking at an LMS. I'm looking at something completely different. And I'm also thinking that I've never heard of a KBI. That's it. Those are exactly what I need, and I need to do some reading. So thank you to everyone. It's been enlightening.
Yeah, thank you. Melissa just put the actual citation for the book, so if you want to order it, you can get it. I did not know if I asked you, did I ask you where you got the images from? Because if not, if you can share that with people where to get the images from, where they can order those. Some people might not know where to get their own deck.
We'll get that information for you.
Okay, perfect. Yes, and when we're done, I've had more than one person ask me about recordings and slides. Any of the speakers, if you're prepared to share your slides, get it to Emma, and Emma will get out slides and recordings. And the recordings are separated, right? So you'd be able to get it in pieces.
Yeah.
Others on your takeaway today?
I guess I'll just say, I mean, I learned a lot today. There was a lot that I, hadn't heard of before, regarding the KBIs and how to use them. And then, really, what it comes down to is it's intentional, listening to others, considering how they might be feeling or their perception, because we get so busy in our day to day, it's easy to overlook those things. So really spending time, making sure that we're getting feedback that we can use to improve the process, to make people feel more a part of a team, a part of something bigger, instead of isolated, because that does happen so much. So I really just think all of these tools and techniques today just really help me kind of get a better grasp on it, but there's still a lot that I need to dive into and learn more about. But I really enjoyed it. So thank you, everyone.
You're most welcome. Anyone else? All right. Peter, you want to move on with, let's get to the next steps and then we'll close out for the day. You're on mute.
One thing I was reflecting, we talked a lot about, feelings and emotions on the second half of this. And, some work that Cheryl and I with some colleagues have done is on a feeling-based improvement cycle. So, in Lean and Agile and all this sort of thing, we do things like PDCA or DMAIC or Six Sigma, etc., which appeals to the sort of logical and sensible sort of scientific thinking, but it doesn't appeal to the sort of things that we've been talking about. What do I feel about this? And, if I feel pretty bad about this, or I've had a bad experience on improvement in the past. So we also thought about how you could develop a feeling-based improvement that was largely around how the individual improves themselves and how do they develop meaning and purpose and flow in their career. So, in terms of our events in the future, last year we did a lot of events like once a month, but probably it was a little bit too often. So we were thinking of maybe in the future just doing an event like once a quarter, maybe a little bit like this, where we take one or two topics, gather a few folks together that are interested and want to share examples like we had from today. But I mean, that could be one area that we could focus on, that meaning-based improvement that works in the limbic part of the brain, which kicks in before the cognitive part of the brain. But I mean, that's just one thing. So I guess one of the things is, what would be interesting for you guys? Do you want to do more of these sort of things, or is this useful? Is it worth the time? Would quarterly sessions for half a day work, or is that too much, too little? What are your thoughts?
Peter, if I may, I thought it was, the timing was good, the length, it's for a virtual session. I appreciated I think it was a good mix of interaction and sharing. So that was, right on. In terms of content, it was dense. So that was a lot of content. So that's and I appreciate all of them. I just texted Helen, I like to go to bed a little bit smarter than I was when I woke up. And I believe that that will be achieved today.
Good.
Really
very good.
Anyone else? Thoughts? What you might like to get? The purpose of the network is mostly to share best practices related to things in the people value stream. So that's really, it's that simple. If you have thoughts, you can either put them in the chat and let us know later. Emma, when will things come out?
So it'll be Monday next week. I'll send across the recordings and gather all of the material from the speakers and send those across, plus more details on the network as well. Some examples of what we've done and the topics. So perhaps that would be a good opportunity once you've had digested today to send across to me any thoughts you have on how we could operate.
Give them images to pick from when they want.
How they felt. How you felt.
Pick the image that most says what you might like. All right.
I think for Didier, he's going to have one of a of a ship bouncing in the motion. He's going to say, I felt a bit at sea. There was so much density. Yeah. Okay. Very good.
Are we good? We need to do anything else? We're good to go?
Good.
All right.
Okay. Thanks for attending. Hopefully you got some good ideas, and hopefully see you another time.
Yes. Thank
Right.
you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye,
Thanks,
everyone.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.